Are we live?
We are live.
We are live.
Good
Thank
evening.
you. Good evening, everybody, and welcome back. Lindsay and I have been on spring break, so we thought we'd take this opportunity just to catch up on a few of the things that have been in the headlines while we've been out of it, as it were. And I've got one or two things, but Lindsay, you've been on the telephones today, and I believe you've come up with one or two things about what's happening with rural broadband up north.
Aye, there's some funny gowns on up on Moor, they're saying. So Alston and Cybermoor appear to have more than just a few issues. So they recently informed everyone that a company called Briscona, who are fairly Spanish but have an office in England, were taking over the connections, although when you talk to people on the moor, it's very difficult to find people who've ever been particularly satisfied with Cybermoor's connections. I understand there's a few houses have fibre, but not very many, and there was quite a lot of money given for that. And I don't know what's happened with the Flying Shepherd project. And the latest thing is a new website, cybermoor.co.uk, which has an open letter on implying that the directors of Cybermoor and Cybermoor Networks have resigned. So there's an AGM on the 7th of July, where hopefully we may find out a little more, but it's a bit tragic after all the money that's been fed up into Cumbria to create rural broadband projects of various hues that it appears to have gone belly up. Now,
correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't Cybermoor one of the beneficiaries of the DCMS's latest largesse, and aren't they due to receive something like £450,000 in order to explore a novel funding mechanism which involves attracting money from private individuals?
That is what it seemed to make out in the 8 potential recipients of the £10 million that's just been put out for innovation in broadband. I understand there's definitely at least 2 Cybermoor companies, and there could be more, so whether it's gone to a different company, I'm not sure. But it's the question of where that money currently is, and, you know, for instance, there's obviously been an issue with Cybermoor since April when Briscona took over, so it's quite strange that DCMS don't appear to have been informed of that and adjusted their announcement about Cybermoor being given all this money.
I thought Cybermoor was a community organization.
It is.
How could it be sold then without the community knowing about it?
Well, I think we might have to make a few more phone calls up to the moor to get the answers to this. But I definitely think this is something that the shareholders, it's a co-op. I mean, I think it's a industrial benefit society actually, but I mean, it was run as a co-op. The members are residents on the moor, and presumably they'll be a bit kerfuffled by this latest, that it's no longer a community project and it's being run by a strictly commercial concern that is based a very, very long way away from Cumbria, to be honest. Its offices are in Spain.
Right. And we've heard nothing from DCMS about this and what due diligence DCMS might have done on Cybermoor before they allocated this money.
No. And it would be, can we get a DCMS spokesperson on to talk about this? Because actually, Cybermoor is really well known in the community network space. It was one of the very first to start up. I mean, back in 2001, I think, Daniel and the folk up the moor were pushing to put wireless in and everything. And, you only need to go to Alston and talk to a few people there to understand that that was never terribly successful. And then money was given for fibre. Ed Vasey went up there to launch it, which had to be faked, basically, because the connections weren't ready to actually switch on. And, and all of us in the industry, the community broadband industry, have known that there are issues up there, so presumably this has reached back to DCMS. So the recent announcement about their share of the pot, the 400 and I can't remember precisely how much it was. I've got 480,000.
It was just a shade under 450.
Okay, I mean, that's a lot of money. That's nearly £500,000 going into a small community to provide. You know, there's only 7 other bidders in that, and none of them, to me personally, I mean, we'll come back to this question about these new suppliers. None of them look particularly innovative, but Cybermore, you would have thought, had some level of stability and durability by the amount of time it's been out there. But, you know, word on the moor has always been that it was a bit ropey.
Right, okay. Well, perhaps we can leave that and go on to have a look at some of the projects that did actually attract funding. Was there anything there that struck your fancy, that you thought was particularly innovative?
No, was there for you? I mean,
No.
no, I didn't, you know.
To be fair, hang on. To be fair, I thought MLL Telecom, which wants to aggregate a number of different wireless networks and bring them back to a fiber peering point. That to me sounded as if it had possibilities. It kind of refers back to the old idea that of the Fi-Wi system and the digital village pump, which to my mind still has legs, except that circumstances have just made it that extremely difficult to bring about. The other people I thought were quite interesting was CallFlow. And I wish I had my notes here with me, but CallFlow looked interesting as well, because the other people who were offering satellite services, well, we know that satellite works. Of course it does. To me, it's staggering that you need to prove the concept anymore. And similarly with most of the other projects, it's all been done before. Why do they have to spend money on these things which are meant to be innovative issues and dealing with the final 5%? To my mind, very few of these things will extend to the final 5%, except satellite, because once you've got the bird up there, you've got fixed costs, and all you have to do is put up a dish and an antenna and receive it, and away you go. What you do with the signal after that, that might be interesting, but as it sits, no big deal. Sorry, guys.
I think the thing that I would have liked to have seen in a way is that, well, obviously more fibre, and you know, and there isn't a specific Fi-Wi project in there. MLL already has a fairly comprehensive amount of wireless networks around there. If they're not already fibre fed, I'd be very surprised. North Yorkshire County Council, for instance, went with MLL way back when, 2003 or something. But that they haven't sort of joined people up. So here we have a Fi-Wi project with voucher scheme, all in one, and join it all up. And that, I think, to me, was what was missing the most, in that because such a large amount of the rural areas has been given to BT under the BD UK stuff, what's left is a very small bit of the pie. And the only way to make it viable, as it were, for fibre to the home, is to aggregate all these areas together. And what I sort of think we're getting with the 8 providers, well, probably 7 now, Cybermore out of the picture, is it's piecemeal again. You know, it's not joining everything up. And to me, that's the really big shame, that they could have said, right, what we actually know now, based on ADSL rollout and what we're looking at the figures, say the 96%, and, you know, let's talk about point topic shortly as well, and how many people that leaves, then there is a viable business, as far as I can see, if you bring together everything. So you've got your fibre and into your Fi-Wi sort of thing. Where possible, you do fibre to the home, because, you know, the figures are stacking up now at sort of 30, 50, 100 homes. You're there for the fibre to the home. If you've also got subsidised voucher schemes where people are buying in bulk because they're working together, then, you know, I think we could hit a huge number of rural homes who are currently in the 5%, which I believe is going to be more like the final third still. Even after all this money, I still think we're going to be looking at final third. Then They could have used this innovation fund to really cover some ground. The fact that they've given £500,000 away to a company which appears to have gone like that in the last couple
Really,
of days, yeah, but it's quite worrying, isn't it? And you know, so that's £500,000 that's now going to have to presumably be reallocated, unless you know there are more cyber companies out there. One of them's going to pick it up. And to me, this would have been a brilliant opportunity to really, you know, look what Barnes done with no public funding whatsoever. They're just getting on and doing it. The lessons that are being learned from Barn are being sort of lost in the wider scheme of things. You know, that it's only this tiny communities who are going to the open days and learning for themselves, whereas that knowledge and from GigaClear, say, and all the other, you know, bays and bars and all the other little projects and the stuff that's going on in Scotland could have been fed into this, and I don't really see it happening.
but Lynn,
And I don't see anything. I'm sorry to say it. Nothing.
I have some sympathy with this, but we're between kind of a rock and a hard place. My understanding is that Barn didn't apply for any of the money that was available under the sort of the final 5% program because at the Suppliers Day they were told that the postcodes that they wanted to cover were not going to be de-scoped. And spoke to some people who said, well, if they're not going to be de-scoped, then we're not going to risk the money. And
well, wasn't there rather a lot of people walked out of the Suppliers Day for that reason?
I understand that's what all the community fiber networks did. But my point is that you've got to be in it to win it, right? So you have to stay the course with it. And
sure.
As much as difficult as it is, and as much you have to bite your tongue in order to stay there, you have to be there. Now, one of the things which I think hasn't been exploited is the RCBF, and there are clearly issues that we could talk about, which we have discussed before on this program, but while we've been away, it's been quite clear that Northmoor in West Oxfordshire has been able to extract about £186,000 and give it to GigaClear for GigaClear to build out a fibre-to-the-home network pretty much in David Cameron's backyard. And it would be very instructive if perhaps we can get Matthew Hare on here to explain how he managed to liberate this money, because that's an extraordinary achievement, and I believe he is almost unique in this.
Well, isn't GigaClear about the only company or community that's actually got any money out of RCBF? I mean, who else has got RCBF money?
I don't know of anybody. But I do know. I do know.
Staggering, appalling process into, you know, smaller pots of money, but equally badly managed money. It really makes no sense whatsoever to me. Anyway.
Well, welcome to Broadband Britain.
Yes, I know. I've been here too long.
Okay, but just moving on slightly, I do know a company, and this is City Fibre, which is exploiting the government's Super Connected Cities program in order to create demand, speak to the SMEs, and get enough money available to making those last mile connections. Now, I spoke to City Fibre earlier this week, and they said their latest funding round was 30 million, and that's on top of about 16.5 million they raised with their initial IPO. Now they're fully funded, and they can do 20 cities, and they can build fiber backbones in all of those cities. Now it's getting that capillarity, getting that granularity out there, and that's the next stage. And the Super Connected Cities project could go a long way to helping them do that.
Yeah. I spoke to the chief exec of City Fibre at an event in Den Haag, I think it was, a couple of years ago, and said, you know, this is what needs to be done, that the community networks are out in the countryside need to move in, as it were, on their backhaul, where they've got the market to be able to justify putting in decent core networks around, or rings around cities or whatever, like they're doing in York, and that then they could feed into the hinterlands. But that isn't necessarily their core market, or it wasn't at the time. So what they actually wanted was to be talking to more communities who are around the outskirts of the cities, in the rural areas and the market towns and stuff, where communities wanted to be doing that bit. So the self-dig and all the rest of it, which is possibly slightly out of the business model of City Fibre, could be done by the locals in the market towns and the villages, but that they would join in and enjoy the capacity that City Fibre can put in, because they've got the numbers in the city, basically.
Right.
So, I mean, maybe that's somewhere that we will see more work. But that, again, this is this cooperation and collaboration thing that I haven't really seen with the Innovation Fund. You know, that 10 million would have gone a long way for getting those people round tables to talk to each other and stuff.
Well, there have been plenty of opportunities for everyone to get around a table.
The trouble is, Ian,
there hasn't been any money on the table until very, very recently, let's face it.
Well, true, but for the people who are just getting on with it, you know, the JFDI crew, we've had some pretty dreadful weather the last couple of years. It's now summer. It's about to be hay time. This is when everyone is out digging. They are stupidly busy. The idea of sitting around a table, even to have lunch at the moment, is, you know, almost out of reach in a way. And, you know, the time to be talking about this stuff is over winter, when it's so wet and the ground's frozen that people are really struggling to be able to do anything. You know, not in the middle of summer, basically.
Well,
and if you live out in the sticks, you probably hate timing anyway, right now. Also.
Right. Okay. Let's move on slightly. I don't know if you saw that Point Topic, which is quite a well-known market research company. Point Topic has got a contract from the European Commission to monitor broadband rollouts throughout Europe. So in the last day or so, they've published a map which shows where BT is not going to enable exchanges or cabinets. And there's something like, according to Point Topic, about 570 of these which are not going to be enabled. And that covers a population of something like 1 million people. Now, personally, I don't want to be one of those 1 million people, and I would hate to be on the other end of the telephone when one of those 1 million people phones up BT and says, "Why aren't you doing me?" But just to be clear about it, there are about 65 million people living in Britain, so 5% of 65 million is about 3.25 million. So BT, if it meets all its contracted targets and covers 95% of the population, they've got that latitude to play with. So if only 1 million people are not going to receive high-speed broadband, super-fast broadband, then BT can still say to everyone, "Hey guys, we've done our job, and what's more, we've met target and we've exceeded target." Over to you. Any thoughts on that?
Okay, yeah, of course I do. I think we have to remember what happened with the ADSL rollout. We were told 99.umpteen% of the population had broadband, right? Which had already been redefined from 2 meg symmetrical down to anything over dial-up to meet the criteria and tick the boxes. I think there's an awful lot of people who are on exchanges and cabinets who aren't on that map, who will not get connected. I mean, we've redefined superfast downwards quite a lot already. Whilst there are people getting gigabit and, you know, 100 meg symmetrical and all the rest of it, superfast broadband wavers somewhere downwards from 24, as far as I can tell, even though the EU definition of it is higher than that. So they may not do 500 odd exchanges, but I suspect, and then be able to say, you know, that we're within our targets, etc. But I think of the exchanges they are enabling and the cabinets there are a hell of a lot of people who are not going to get super fast broadband off those.
Right. Well, how can we measure this slightly more accurately?
Wet string is probably the most accurate measurement, I reckon, when it comes down to this. I think it's very difficult. We've seen from all of these years doing it that an actual speed measurement, I mean, Sam Knows, wasn't it? Or was it Sam Knows or Think Broadband, had to put out their own routers just to try and get some sort of accurate measure. Because unless you're plugged directly into where the connection comes in the house, from that point onwards of it being in the house or the business premises or whatever, everything's starting to drop off. It depends on your wiring. It depends on the age of your computer, your speed of your computer, the thickness of your walls, how wet your dog is. I mean, it seems to have so many different things going on. And getting accurate measurements, I mean, really and truly, the measurements over, say, for instance, BT Broadband ought to be coming from within their system. You know, they know these figures. They know when someone's getting a really poor connection to their premises. And the fact that those are never shared and that we're just given whatever the PR and spin people put out, and we're supposed to take that as read, and everything else apparently is anecdotal evidence. Even if, you know, like, what's his name, who came on from near Preston, who'd been to every house within a however many mile radius to ask specific questions and to run his own speed tests, apparently that's anecdotal evidence. So, you know, it's very difficult when the incumbent doesn't want to play. I mean, Virgin and Sky and various other companies who do have access to a much smaller subset of data, for sure, because they don't have the same market share as BT do, but they should start putting out their figures. I think Virgin are quite good on their stuff, but, you know, measuring it accurately, very difficult unless the companies want to play ball. And is it in BT's interest to say that everyone's not getting super fast? No, not really. Even though we all know that's the case, they're not going to stand up and say it, are they?
Well, Linz, this is one of the things that is becoming interesting now, because thanks to local loop unbundling, which allows people like TalkTalk and Sky to take over the copper line which connects the cabinets to the exchange to the premises. There are more than 5 million lines out there, and I'm not quite sure how many lines there are, but let's say there are 20 million that BT has installed. So that's we're talking between, I don't know, a quarter and a fifth of the lines out there, which most statisticians would say that's a reasonable sample. So yeah. TalkTalk and Sky, I think, probably know what BT's network, how BT's network is performing. We can talk a little bit about this in a second or two, but you had some earlier news about how the network is actually performing?
Yeah, well, because I'm sort of a bit involved with various ISPs and everything, and also, you know, I've been watching the reg, and there's been a lot of network outages over the last couple of months. There's been a lot of fairly major incidents, and some of the ISPs are beginning to say that the core network, you know, a lot of that is BT's core network, is not fit for purpose, and that they're spending more time trying to get faults fixed to their clients than they are being able to actually solve what the original client problem was. So if, for instance, a client has had too many lines and not been using them properly and is trying to move to unified comms, then that was the reason for trying to deal with the client. And then they're spending so much time doing remedial fault repair and trying to get the right engineer to turn up to the right address. I mean, even that seems to be causing problems, to deal with issues which are then slowly but surely, after, and it can be several engineer visits, nailed down to not being within the client premises and actually being on the other side of the network. And, you know, that they're having to pick up the tab for dealing with those problems. problems, because until the connection that they've sold to the client works again, as far as the client's concerned, they ain't paying for it. You know, they're withholding their money until it works again. But the problem is quite often that the issues are in the core network. And there have been some fairly considerable outages over the last couple of months.
Sorry, Lindsay, let's be clear about this. You're saying that the problems are in the core network? This is,
well,
so there are at least three networks, right? There's the core network, there's the aggregation network, and then there's the local network, right? So three places where the problem can happen. At the moment, we're not all on Ethernet point-to-point or anything like that, so we have these multiple networks. So where do you think, are you absolutely sure that it's in the core network rather than the other networks?
No, I think the problem is that it's across most of the network. Like, everything beyond the wall of the building, like within the building, you can normally suss where a fault is, right? It's a faulty device, or it's a faulty bit of wiring, or it's a socket, or whatever. What's happening is that the faults that are being called are either like sort of from there to the exchange, say, or we're seeing big faults that are taking out swathes of the country, mobile as well as, you know, fixed line and all the rest of it, which are caused by everything from copper theft through to overload, through to, you know, there are silt in the ducts. I mean, there are so many things that can happen. And I think the problem is that the network is under a huge amount of strain. All parts of the network are under strain. Within the premises, your strain is generally human, right? That's where your biggest problem occurs. Then as soon as you leave the building, the problem is occurring in the cabling, in the exchanges, in the hardware, in the software. It's occurring across the board. The point is that the ISPs, who are, you know, we have a competitive marketplace, these guys are allowed to sell and stuff. Invariably, they don't have a huge amount of control over the network, the actual network. They might have control over the service that they sell across that network, or the tariff that they charge, or the device that they plug into it, or whatever, but the actual network is not your bog standard ISP's problem, which is why we see with consumer broadband, for instance, people phone their provider, who could be TalkTalk or whoever, and then they have to escalate the problem up to, say, BT, who then check the line and say it's not their problem. It goes back to talk to the customer. The customer says, no, it's not on my end. It goes back up to BT. And we're getting people disconnected for 6 months at a time, while these problems are just thrown around like juggling balls.
Sorry,
where
Lindsay,
the ISP
sorry, disconnected for 6 months at a time?
Oh, God, get on the forums. There's loads of people complaining about this sort of stuff. Get on any of the forums, Think Broadband, any of those places, and have a look at what people are going through.
Okay, would you excuse me just a minute, talk amongst yourself, because I want to have a look at the Office of Telecommunications Adjudicator, who collects these figures, and let me see if I can find his latest comments about what's going on.
So you want me to talk amongst myself? Right, okay. How about let's do a little advert. Because we really, really need large companies to come and support TechQT. This is a freebie for Hyperoptic, okay? Hyperoptic, feel free to come and sponsor us. I see that for the next 6 months you are doing a gigabit at £30 a month, same as Barn. Well done, guys, and I hope you get some new customers from this little 1 minute advert. I hope you're back now, Ian.
Right, Lindsay. Thank you very much. I'm just looking at the OTA2's website. They say at the end of May, the number of unbundled lines stands at 9.3 million. There are 5.68 million wireless wireless line rentals, and the number of telephone numbers using CPS is 2.19 million. Now, it goes on and on and on, and somewhere down here at the bottom of the page, Um, it should give me the KPIs. Right, so looking at the KPIs, the graph is steadily rising up to 9.3 million lines. This measures BT's responsiveness. First touch, last touch, right first time KPI. From OpenReach, the 4-week moving average appears to be headed downward from April the 14th onwards. The LLU repair line is on the downward trend, and it's still, let me see, the green line is at 70%, and the standard OpenReach is expected to reach is about 92%, so we're looking at a 20% difference there. Wholesale line rental right first time, all of those are below target, which is target's about 98%, and OpenReach seems to be trundling along at about 93%. Wholesale line rental repairs, which is the thing which you were concerned about, the target is about 92%, and BT is, or OpenReach is currently achieving 80%. Ethernet provisioning should be up around 98%. Currently, the figure is about 85%. Ethernet repairs, they seem to be on target. Target looks about 96%, and the graph looks as if it's exactly on that. So, I would say that looks like a kind of a mixed message that we're getting from the official statistics. So, but then again, that was up until May, and May would have only incorporated the figures up until April. So in the last 6 weeks, there might have been some considerable change in that as well.
And also, I mean, I know that a lot of people who have consumer broadband issues have real problems getting them looked into properly. Like Ofcom sort of go, oh, it's not our problem, although Ofcom will be your natural first call. Actually, you have to go to the adjudicator for your ISP, don't you?
Pretty much.
And a lot of people find the entire process a complete and utter ball ache. And instead of, I mean, it adds yet more phone calls, form filling, etc., into the when is my broadband coming back on question. And, you know, it seems to me that probably a lot of people don't go through the process to then show in the statistics. And presumably for the wholesale line rental, for instance, complaints, I mean, are the ISPs putting in every single complaint, or are they working really hard to get their customers connected again, and those fault reports, etc., aren't going to the adjudicator? I mean, you know, how often are they automatically collected?
Lindsay, I must be honest, I don't know exactly how the OTA2 collects its data, but it does. It's the forum where ISPs can go to, can take OpenReach to court, as it were, and get some resolution on it. These guys are all telecoms professionals. They've been around a long time. They understand the pressures on both sides of the equation, and it's as a result of that that just recently OpenReach has agreed with Ofcom to accept penalties if OpenReach doesn't meet certain criteria in terms of quality of service. Now, admittedly, they're only going to measure OpenReach over a year, so if OpenReach has a bad quarter or a bad half, there's plenty of time for OpenReach to try and make good. And it's only going to be time further down the line that any action, restorative action might and compensation might be available from OpenReach.
But if what we're seeing is actual problems within the network, So components within the network, for instance, right, that aren't being replaced in a timely manner or upgraded or just keeling over under the strain of data that's passing over the network, then a lot of these issues are going to worsen. So although OpenReach might improve its response times, for instance, if these things are being caused on a regional scale each time they happen, you know, is that going to show up in those fault reports or in those statistics as saying 87,000 people were affected? And obviously, if that many people are affected by a network outage, BT or whoever's network it is throws everybody they have at it just to get it resolved as quickly as possible, because the strain on the customer service line presumably is quite difficult in those sorts of situations, let alone the number of people putting out tweets and phoning the register up and saying, you know, this has happened to me this morning and stuff. So, you know, if what we're seeing is network upgrade issues and stress that's being caused by the amount of data traffic in particular, it's not voice calls, is it, that's causing the issue, then these problems, and if it's being reported by ISPs that these seem to be getting worse, then what's being done across the country to improve that? I know BT's had loads of money, but it's struggling really hard with its fibre to the cabinet stuff. Everything's delayed. We know that they're constantly advertising for new engineers. You know, they've taken on a hell of a lot of people recently. There's a lot of people gone through fibre training. You know, there's not very many training companies in the UK. It's quite easy to find out how many BT people they've trained recently. And so they're already struggling as it is, just coping with the targets that have been set, say, under BT UK, or whatever.
I was under the impression that BT's commercial rollout is finished. So all of the engineers who were busy building networks to compete with Virgin Media, essentially, are now available to go and work in the other parts of Britain that have not yet been fibered up or whatever. So
do we really believe the commercial rollout is finished?
Sorry, say again?
Do we really believe the commercial rollout is finished?
Well, that's certainly the impression that's been given in BT's official statements. I mean,
yeah, but they gave the impression
back here and there, but
broadband in 2005. 100% of Yorkshire, North Yorkshire, had broadband. Really? So why was so much money required to give everybody in Yorkshire broadband again? You know, we are given the impression that, let's have a little bit of truth from these guys about what's actually going on. But yes, you're right. There should be an absolute surfeit of engineers. But they're not, if it's not on their job sheet and they're trained in the wrong thing, they can't go and do it, can they? This is like this underground, overground thing. You know, you have a pole and it's got a problem on it, and they send out the underground guy who says, oh no, I can't do that. Well, you'll have to get an overground engineer to come and do that problem. It's just ridiculous. Like, they should train across the board for it.
I was going to say, aren't these guys cross-trained?
Not in everything, obviously. And, you know, you'd think, with all the spare time on their hands drinking cups of tea, waiting for the person in India to allow them to move down their job sheet to the next task, or to do whatever they're actually supposed to be doing and get permission from the high-ups to do it, they could be learning all sorts of new skills beyond making tea and laybys.
Well, unfortunately, they don't have access to the network, and the mobile network signal out there is a slang dodgy, so you can't do your online e-learning.
Go on, let's talk about that, mobile signals, right? There's loads and loads of stuff online at the minute about 4G. And all across Europe, lots of information about 4G and how we're moving up to this, and it's going to change the world. Everyone everywhere will suddenly have at least a mobile signal, if nothing else, right? Are the mobile broadband providers actually in a position, do you think, with the delays that have been with, say, roll out fibre to the home, in particular, not as much fibre to the cabinet, but has these delays and the reluctance of certain incumbents to play the fibre to the home game given the mobile providers a really good opportunity?
So the mobile operators deal in last mile connectivity, right? So from your handset back to a point somewhere on the network, most of the time that's to a mobile mast. But now that mobile mast has to be connected back to the core network. And Vodafone came out with some research just very, very recently, which said that there is a coming crisis in how you get back from your mast back to the network, because currently pretty much everybody uses microwave, and we are running out of bandwidth in all the microwave frequencies, the traditional microwave frequencies, let me say. So that's one of the reasons that prompted Vodafone to go and buy Cable and Wireless, because Cable and Wireless has got a national fiber network, and that's the only network that's going to be, fiber is going to be the only way that you'll be able to get cope with the data demand that's coming on mobile and get that moving around the network at a rate which is going to give you, the user, a reasonable quality of service. Something that you know, when you download a movie from Netflix or something like that, it's going to run without buffering on your mobile phone. And that's going to be a big thing. Now, Vodafone has complained about this. It's raised a flag and it said, guys, we need access to more spectrum, and we are really, really worried about BT's control over the fiber backhaul network, because BT is then in a position to squeeze us on price, and that's going to make life extremely difficult for everybody in future. Now,
yeah, well, because for a while before the microwave became so effective, an awful lot of, especially rural mass, were fed with leased lines, which are stupidly expensive because you paid by the inch to get the damn things put in, and they were all right back in the day, but the data costs now are just ridiculous. So this was one of the things I had a chat with Peter Radley, who then went on to be OpenReach, and the guy from Arqiva, and said, you know, who owned loads of the mass, and said, what really we ought to be talking about is that we, the community, will help you put fibre into the mobile mast so that you bring us better mobile, but we will then Wi-Fi off that mast into our village so that we've got Fi-Fi, literally. You get a mast, you know, and there is no reason for you all mobile operators not to share the same mast, because, you know, they're having to go that way anyway to try and get the best level of coverage. In Scotland, I know Highlands and Islands years and years ago managed to sit down all the mobile operators and talk to them and said, we know how expensive it is to provide mobile up, especially to the Northern Isles. So what we want you to do is discuss where the best places are to put the masts and agree that you will share them, so that when the mobile signal arrives in the Highlands and Islands, the customers there have a choice who they buy from, but you've only put up one set of poles.
Right.
And that was back in about 2002. They managed to get them to do that. So,
well, Lindsay, you may have seen just in the last week or so, the government has come out and said, we think it's a good idea if all the mobile network operators organize a national roaming program. And
exactly.
The industry's immediate response was, well, where's the incentive to build out a network then?
Yeah.
Well,
that's sort of them.
Any thoughts on
that? I mean, I think as more and more people go onto mobile devices, whether that's a tablet or because they're using their laptop on a Wi-Fi connection or whatever, and I mean, you know, the PC is dying out. And, you know, those enormous things that sit under your desk, like down there, are going out of fashion finally, and therefore more and more people are going to need either access to Wi-Fi, or they want to be on the cellular network where 100 gig of data isn't going to cost you the earth each month, that you can use that amount of data, and the only way to be providing that amount of data is to have everything connected into a fibre network. And to me, the mobile operators either have a fantastic window of opportunity, or they're going to sit around and whinge a lot about where's the incentive. Well, the incentive is surely if the numbers in Britain are anywhere like what they are globally, there are way more than 65 million mobile phones in England already, and that's without counting tablets and, you know, smart anythings. And if what you're getting is that you're getting your home Wi-Fi connection or in your local cafe down a mobile signal, and then using your Wi-Fi on your laptop to pick up on it, the motivation for the network operators surely ought to be owning every single customer. You know, why would you have a phone line in your house?
Yeah, but Linz, there are 4 network operators. So none of them wants to build out a network, because then they will have to make it available under equal access conditions to all the other operators. And
But Ian, it's worked so well with PT. Surely they can just steal that model.
Well, it seems that the regulators want more competition in the mobile space than they do in the fixed line space. Lord alone knows why it should be different.
There is apparently plenty of competition in the fixed line space, as long as you know that what you're buying was originally a BT product.
Well, it depends on what level you're talking about competition, because I was reading...
Large corporates work at a different level from all of us anyway.
Sure.
But for the vast majority of SMEs in this country, etc.,
they use BT's wires.
Yeah.
Well, OpenReach is quite candid about this. They say that OpenReach has significant market power, i.e. an effective monopoly, on all last mile access, which surprised me slightly, because I thought Virgin Media was reasonable competition in at least half the population. So, but anyway, that's Ofcom for you. Linz, I just wanted to move on to another thing which came up quite recently. You know that TalkTalk had a complaint about how little it was being charged for. I beg your pardon. Let me get this right. How much it was being charged for wholesale access, and how little margin there was between BT's wholesale access price and its retail price for broadband speeds. And TalkTalk went to Ofcom and said, we think that BT is conducting what they call a margin squeeze. In other words, not allowing us enough headroom for us to be able to make a profit on selling against BT retail for a broadband product. In the last week, Ofcom has come out and said we didn't find any grounds to substantiate TalkTalk's complaint, but in the very same breath, they said we are going to conduct an investigation, a consultation into BT's margin pricing activities. And when I spoke to Ofcom, they said the TalkTalk complaint is historical and is backward-looking, and their new consultation is forward-looking, because it's going to take into account BT Sport and what margins that BT might be making on sport, and how that might affect its basic broadband pricing. Now, just hang on half a sec. I'm going to run out of battery in a minute if I don't plug in. Hang on.
Don't do that.
Right. That little arrow should go away. Hopefully we're all back online. Right.
That's what we like.
Now, this whole margin pricing issue is extremely interesting, because I see we've just got 10 minutes left.
Yeah.
I got through the Post today, or I beg your pardon, yesterday, a very interesting article which said that this is slightly complicated, so bear with me while I try and get it right. Because of the local loop unbundling that's going on, so I think, as we said, 9 million lines unbundled, BT is going to lose profit on those lines. So because of the way BT is evaluated for business rates, and they've lost that capacity to earn money on, to rent those lines out, they're being compensated by a large rebate back on the business rates. Now, one would have thought that that rebate would then be passed on to TalkTalk and Sky and the rest of the local loop unbundlers, but it turns out that this isn't the case. It appears that while BT is taking the rebate based on its assets, when it comes back to giving a rebate to the local loop unbundlers, its customers, it's only giving them 15p per line instead of something like £20 per line per year. So.
But hang on a minute, because BT already have preferential business rates as well. That, you know, there have been so many arguments about their preferential business rates.
Well,
so if they're also getting a rebate on those as well, I mean, this is all a bit fishy. I'm glad I'm not talk. I know that.
Well, this is one of the delights of living in Britain, because you get what you negotiate. And if you've got a good negotiating team, and if you've got good lawyers, you can go to the competition commission and the competition appeals tribunal and play it all the way down the line. And BT has in fact done this. It looked at it was the subject of a complaint by Sky and TalkTalk against Ofcom's adjudication of wireless line rentals, which involved a consideration of business rates, and BT's argument held the day. But there is a suggestion, at least, that the competition appeal tribunal wasn't in possession of all the facts, and these are some of the facts that are now starting to emerge. Now, it's still early days, and so I don't want to say very much more about this, but if what is alleged is accurate, then it could be that BT might be liable for a considerable recompense or payment to the people who've rented lines from them on an unbundled basis.
It might be good to get someone from ISPA on to talk about margin squeeze and how this is affecting big and small ISPs. Because I know I was talking to someone last week and they said we've been looking back over the last 20 odd years in business and everything, and we're running to standstill now. That there is, the money in telecoms is so reduced. And the interesting part of it was, what is the next big thing? In the past, there's always been a big thing around the corner that was coming along, which would give you an opportunity to get yourself ahead again, and you know, because it was the big trend or whatever. And the question that we were asking was, what is the next big thing in telecoms? Where is the place that, after all these squeezes over the last couple of years at least, small telecoms companies and ISPs can start to regain their feet, or should they just retire?
It's a question that we should leave until next week, I think.
Oh no, I'm saying we should try and get some people on.
I'm happy to do that. I know one or two people who might well be available. I just need to get their permission and their agreement and work out diary dates and things.
I just want to go to tie up, right? I just want a quick trip to Scotland.
Yep.
And a quick trip to Wales, right?
Go ahead.
So I hear that Bute is getting subsea fibre, which is great because I love up that side of Scotland. It's absolutely fantastic place, and there's been so much work done up there to try and resolve things over the years, from satellite dishes to try and blast Wi-Fi over the top of locks and all the rest of it. But apparently, I don't know who we've got up Scotland who might be able to come on and talk about why this is so. They're not due to actually get a connection until 2016. So it'd be quite nice to know about stuff like subsea fibre that's happening around the British Isles and what is going on with those things.
So I know some people who put fibre out to the Shetlands and then went out and connected all that. So Butte isn't all that far from Shetland and possibly an easier haul as well. So if these chaps are waiting until 2016 and their fibre is there already, it seems slightly odd.
It's going in there.
Yeah.
There was pictures of diggers on the beach and stuff. Anyway, so I'd like to get some Scottish folk to come on and tell us what's happening around Scotland, because you don't hear anywhere near enough about it. And the other thing, which I'm going to mention, well, what is going on in Wales? Come on.
Oops. Hang on a second. Indeed, what is going on in Wales? The last the last I heard, there is a formal complaint to the European Commission about what is happening, in particular with fibre speed, because fibre speed was funded by taxpayers to the tune of 30 million quid, and the current maps of BT's Superfast Cymru rollout cover the fibre speed areas. So it's an interesting issue, and it's a question of watch this space. But I think we should get one of our former guests back on here to explain to us what is the current state of play.
So do I. So do I. Because I would like it explained to me, you know. I know they sort of got their own flag and parliament and all the rest of it, but I'm quite interested in what happens over the borders. Well, I know the Scottish haven't quite done all their thing yet. It might be quite interesting what happens in September.
September?
One last thing that I want to throw out there. So I don't think I mentioned this. Did I mention Cambridgeshire at the beginning of the show? No, I didn't, did I?
No.
Okay. So, but I want to know if anybody who actually watches this show has any idea of the situation with this. Apparently, Cambridgeshire is suffering unsustainable borrowing levels due to infrastructure projects such as Superfast Broadband and the Ely bypass. And shortly, £1 in every 10 quid will go towards covering the debt. So what I want to know is how other counties are coping with paying over the next couple of years, presuming they've borrowed the money for Superfast Broadband, which Cambridgeshire clearly has, and we are in times of austerity, etc., etc. How is the Superfast Broadband rollout, in particular, going to affect counties servicing their debts over the next few years? Because surely the purpose of all this Superfast Broadband thing was for economic benefit rather than the opposite. So I just wondered if anyone out there has any actual facts and figures about counties and Superfast Broadbands and debt burdens.
Well, this is an interesting question, Lindsay, because according to the current research, the government is getting a payback of £20 for every single pound that it spends on broadband. So my argument would be is, why isn't the government pouring money into broadband with a rate of return like that? I just don't see it.
And on that note, I think we should call it an evening.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure as always.
Thank you. Thank you.